Welcome to the Healthy Skin Show with Jennifer Fugo, where we're flipping everything you've been told about your chronic skin issues upside down and connecting you with alternative solutions your dermatologist never told you about.
Welcome back to episode number 157 of the Healthy Skin Show. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about something that's kind of complex. I'm going to be honest with you guys. When we talk about immune system triggers, a lot of times people's eyes will glaze over. And I understand. It's complicated. And I happen to find the right person to have this conversation with us today. And she knows the ins and outs of immunity so well that she was able to break down this very complex conversation into something that is not only memorable, but something that every single one of you from now on, whenever you hear any of these complicated immune terms, you're going to know exactly what they're talking about. Before we dive into that conversation, I wanted to quickly answer a listener's question. I know that we haven't done this in a while, and I totally apologize, but a lot of the guests I've had on lately, the interviews have gone a bit long. And frankly, I'm really appreciative that they were willing to give so much of their time. And so today we had a few extra minutes and I thought I would answer this question quickly. It was emailed in by Ted. He said, I've seen a lot of alternative practitioners who suggested that I do different cleanses because they said that I had a bunch of problems. Like my gut is, having issues because I'm constipated, where I'm going to the bathroom every 3 to 4 days. I feel like every herbal product they've given me causes my skin to go crazy. And it's made me afraid to try any herbs again. Do you think that I'm just really sensitive to herbs? I'm getting desperate for some help with my skin, so anything you can suggest, I would appreciate. Thank you so much for asking that question in the first place. I think it's a good one, and I would invite you to revisit a recent episode with Rocky Roy. It's episode number 155, where we discuss this really interesting connection between pollen allergies and we'll say food, but included in that list are botanicals or herbs, many of which are very common to find in detox formulas. And if you do have pollen allergies, or you say, oh no, I got seasonal allergies, I don't know what it is, and there is a chance that you may actually be cross-reactive to some of those ingredients or those dried herbs that are found in those formulas. So when I work with clients who are very sensitive, and a lot of things seem to trigger them, especially herbs, there's a couple of things that I'll share with you that I think are important. Number one, simplicity is key, right? So we go down to even potentially only single ingredient formulas or products that you're going to put on your skin. So instead of using something that contains 10, 15, 20, or even 30 ingredients, we're going to use something that's super simple. And we're going to hopefully take away potential cross-reactive allergens or any other plant allergens that may be triggers for you. So things like jojoba is actually a wax and it's considered hypoallergenic. I'm not necessarily the most experienced in the whole oil arena, but I can tell you this from interviewing Rachel Pontillo a ton, and we've got a bunch of great episodes from her on this show. So if you want to understand more about formulas and ingredients that are put into skincare products, her episodes are amazing to listen to, and you'll learn a ton from those. But one gem that I learned from Rachel is that when it comes to very sensitive skin, it's best to just use single or incredibly limited ingredient products. So that might mean that you only use jojoba oil or shea butter or something like that. You don't use things that are found on a shelf at, say, Target. You're just going to purchase single oils and test those out and see how you do. As far as detox products, I'm going to be frank with you. I really don't encourage people in any way, shape, or form to use detoxification products. Your body detoxifies in and of itself. I think what's actually missed in this entire conversation, because detox has become so trendy, is that your body actually can detoxify on its own, assuming that you don't have any genetic SNPs or something like that that's causing an issue. But most people and their body has the capacity to do this. It just needs help. It needs a little support and love, because with time and all the things that we go through and potential nutrient deficiencies, etc., it can be increasingly difficult for your liver, for example, which just seems to be like the hot topic of things to do to your body. I got to do a liver detox. Well, your liver already detoxes. So why not support your liver just to do that more efficiently? And that is where I would encourage you to test out some glycine. Glycine is an amino acid, so there's less likely of a chance that you are going to react to that. And you can also consider adding in some other amino acids that can also help support the detoxification pathways. But that is one reason why if I'm going to help support somebody's liver, because liver is an important piece to resolving skin issues, I'm not ever going to use botanicals, ever, because there is a higher likelihood of triggering a problem. I love botanicals. They can be really effective and really helpful for a lot of different things. And it's one of the things that I'm so grateful that I had training in. However, we also have to be mindful that they are potent. They can cause a reaction. And sometimes that reaction can be pretty intense for people and can really set them back from where they want to be in resolving and rebuilding healthy skin. To recap, simplicity is very important when it comes to formulas. Try your darndest to avoid botanicals, and especially a lot of these detox products. You likely don't need them. Focus on glycine as an initial first step in helping support your body's natural, innate detox capacity. But don't expect miracles from it, by the way. I think that's important. A lot of people put all their eggs in one basket when they try with one thing and they think that that one thing's going to fix them. And I can tell you it's just not. Most people need a combination of things, and figuring out what that right combination is something that I really love to help clients with. But that said, I would try the glycine. Look at around 3 grams of glycine a day. You can get the powder. It actually tastes sweet added to water, and give that a shot. And the other thing I would suggest is when you go check out episode number 55, as I was sharing, because that's about the cross-reactive allergens, I actually have a free e-guide that is amazing. It's a really great chart that we built and put together that contains a huge comprehensive list based off of all the pollen allergies and what foods and botanicals and herbs they actually cross-react with. So you can go download that handout, that booklet there, so that way you have a complete list, because we found from looking online that all of the charts were not complete. And they were piecemealed, and it was confusing and difficult to figure out. And so I have a complete list for you. So you can grab that over in episode 155. I hope that that is helpful, since I'm so excited to share this interview with you, because I've been excited for a number of months now, by the way, to share this interview with you. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Healthy Skin Show. Today's guest is someone who can talk all about the connections between immunology and what's going on with your skin. And if you're like, what is immunology? I don't get it. Well, basically, we're going to be talking about how you think something's going on your skin. Like, say you have an eczema rash on the outside of your arms, and we're trained and conditioned to think that the rash is, and the issue that you need to focus on is in those areas. But today's guest is going to help you understand why that is probably not necessarily the case. And we're going to kind of really dive deeper into the whole immunology piece. And we'll have her break down what immunology is if you're not familiar with that term. My guest today is Heather Zwickey. She earned her Ph.D. in Immunology and Microbiology from the University of Colorado Health Sciences Center. She went on to complete a postdoctoral fellowship and teach medical school at Yale University. At the National University of Natural Medicine in Portland, Oregon, Dr. Zwickey launched the Helfgott Research Institute and established the School of Graduate Studies, developed programs in research and nutrition and global health, among others. Dr. Zwickey applied her immunology expertise to natural medicine research, and she currently leads an NIH-funded clinical research training program. She teaches at many universities and speaks at conferences and podcasts everywhere across the globe, and it is an honor to have her here. Thank you so much for joining us, Heather.
Thanks for having me.
So, of course, I got to ask the first question, since I already sort of prefaced the conversation. What is immunology for those who are not familiar with that term?
So I think historically, the way that we've thought about immunology is that the immune system is what keeps you safe from infections. But it's more than that because your immune system is not only keeping you safe from infections, it's also keeping you safe from cancer. It's keeping you safe from autoimmune diseases. So it's the system in your body that's really promoting what we might call health. And it is interacting with what we might say is the nervous system. So we might think of neurotransmitters and those sorts of things. It also interacts with your endocrine system. That's your hormones. So think time of month and all of that sort of stuff. And it interacts with all of the other systems in your body as well. So its job is to determine when you encounter something, is it safe or is it not safe? And I think of that as the primary role of the immune system. If you think all day long, you're breathing, you're eating, everything you're encountering, your body has to know if it's safe or not safe. And the immune system is making that judgment call.
And is that sort of the basic response? Like it looks at something, it says, okay, you're fine, you're cool. But
Yeah,
then it might see something else and be like, whoa, hold the phone. We need to call out the police force. We need to deal with this threat.
exactly. Exactly. And it's got a really hard job because think about it.
Mhm.
You had breakfast this morning. It needs to
Okay.
know that breakfast was safe, right?
Mm.
Whereas if you, after breakfast, walked into a field that's being sprayed with pesticides, it needs to know that the pesticides are not safe. So it's constantly discriminating between what is safe and what do I need to respond to
With the goal to protect you,
with the goal to
right?
protect you. Yeah.
But sometimes things go
Sometimes.
haywire.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes things go haywire.
And so
And
what would
that's
that look like for an immune system that's gone haywire? Like would autoimmunity be one of those instances?
yeah. So in the case of autoimmunity, well, we can think of many things where the immune
Mm.
system goes a little bit haywire, right? So autoimmunity is one. And in autoimmunity, your immune system mistakenly thinks you're dangerous and it starts to attack. But let's even talk about allergies. Why is pollen dangerous? It's not. Your
It's
immune
not,
system,
no.
yeah, no. And so why is it attacking pollen? Because your immune system causes allergies. Now, what's really an interesting little phenomenon is that in countries where there are worms, like that are infect your gut, you don't get allergies because the same type of immune response that you have to a worm is the type of immune response that you have to pollen. And so if you're distracted with worms, then you don't worry about the pollen. It's like in America, we've become so clean, we no longer have worms.
Mm.
So our immune system's like, oh, well, in that case, I'll just attack that pollen instead.
That is super interesting. And I think too that's the other reason why we like there's this asthma
Hmm.
atopic thing going on where we've talked on a previous episode. I want to say it was with Dr. Maya Sheetreat. I think she touched on very briefly this concept of cytokines.
Hmm.
So, are you able to clearly explain to us, like, what are cytokines
Hmm.
and how? Because they're important. I feel like that it's an important part of this process. Um, what are they, and how do they get what makes them what triggers them to be released? Like what for somebody who knows nothing, who's like I've never heard of that before. What would you how would you describe them to
Sure.
them in regards to skin especially?
Yeah. So let's start with what a cytokine is. So first of all, let's spell it. Cytokine. Cytokine. The cyt part, the CYT part, that's cell, and kine is for communication. So this is how cells of the immune system communicate with each other. And if you think about it, a cell doesn't have a mouth, it doesn't have eyes or ears. And so, in order for it to communicate, it needs some other way to talk to another cell. And so, what it's learned how to do, it's kind of interesting. A cytokine looks like a little miniature baseball. And the other cells have little miniature baseball gloves. And so when a cell wants to talk to another cell, it throws a baseball at it and hits it. And if the cell has a glove, it can catch the baseball and it can respond. But if it doesn't have a glove, it can't respond. So all over your body, there are these cells throwing baseballs, and there are cells with gloves catching baseballs. And you've got this communication pattern happening with that form of communication, because you don't have a mouth, you don't have eyes, you don't have ears on those cells. And so that's how they communicate. They get beamed with a baseball. And then they know, hey, I'm supposed to do something now. Okay, so that's how a cytokine works.
And so for someone who has these atopic issues or eczema, or even lots of allergies and asthma, where does the cytokine piece come in? Because I feel like this is one of those parts to the equation that oftentimes is overlooked. Like it's just like, take some Zyrtec.
Yeah. So there's lots of different processes that happen, but let's start with the fact that your immune system has different kinds of responses. So you can think about this as having a multi-car garage. And if it's a beautiful sunny day, you want to take out the convertible. And if it's snowing, you don't want the convertible, right? Then maybe you want the truck. All right. So your immune system has these different vehicles parked in the garage, ready for different types of things that you can respond to. So if, for example, you get a viral infection, then we need to pull out a particular type of immune response to fight that viral infection. Maybe that's your Jeep. So you're going to pull that guy out. It's rugged. It can go over the rough terrain. It can fight that viral infection. If you have worms, now you need more of a tank. Okay, so we pull out the tank to fight the worms. But remember, your allergy, your atopic disease, is imitating a worm response. So essentially what's happened is you have pulled out the tank cytokines, you've pulled out that combination, and you're throwing baseballs at the cells that should be responding just in case you have worms, only you don't have worms. So the cytokines, where they're actually being made, is most often in your gut. So why in your gut? Well, 80% of your immune system is in your gut, because that is the number one way you are exposed to things. Think about it. Most of the stuff that comes into your body is coming in through your mouth. And so usually what your immune system has to do is it has to discriminate between what's coming into either your lungs or your gut as either dangerous or not dangerous. So your immune system is mostly in your gut. So now why is that showing up on the skin? Well, everything that happens in your gut is going to happen systemically, because your immune system then travels through your blood and through your lymphatics to the rest of your body, because it has to defend your whole body. It can't just defend your gut. So even though the initial reaction is happening in the gut, it's driving everything else that you see in the body, including what's on the skin. I like to think of it as, if you put gasoline in your car, it goes to the engine, but it still drives the windshield wipers and every other part of your car too, right? And the alternator can't go around and the wheels don't go around unless you have the gasoline, even though the gasoline is just in the engine, it's not in the wheels. But your wheels are going around because you put the gasoline in the engine.
So with that said, because this is fascinating, and by the way, I love these analogies. They're really easy to understand. Oh my goodness, a cytokine's like a baseball.
Mm-hmm.
That's so great. I love the way that you explain that, because it's very simple and I think it's easy for people to understand. So, it's okay if you don't know. I don't know the answer to this, and it's something that people ask me, like, so we know that a lot of these issues are driven by inflammation, right? And so the cytokines can play a role in that inflammation. But do we know why maybe inflammation can show up in certain areas? Like maybe you only end up with atopic dermatitis on your back, or on your legs, or around your eyes. Any thoughts on that?
We know a little bit. We don't know everything, but we know a little bit. So, first of all, let's talk specifically about atopic dermatitis. So there's some certain things that we know. There are proteins on the surface of your skin called defensins. Defensins are designed for if a bacteria or virus lands on your skin, they're going to just chomp it right up. Okay. But they also keep all of your normal microbes that live on your skin from overgrowing. Okay. So, how do we control our defenses? How do we have this population of daggers on our skin that can fight off infection and keep our normal microbiome from overgrowing? Well, we need a cytokine. And the name of the cytokine for that is called interleukin 22. We abbreviate it IL-22. How do you make more IL-22? So what happens is you make IL-22 in your gut and it goes to your skin and it says, hey, make more defensins because we've got some overgrowth of our normal microbiota, okay, on our skin. What happens is when you take vitamin D tells it sends a message in your gut to the cytokine interleukin 22. Hey, baseball, go and knock all those skin cells into making more defensins, right? And so interleukin 22 acts like the baseball, or it is the baseball, and it goes to your body and it starts throwing baseballs at your skin to say make more defenses. Now we know one of the things that's happening with people with atopic dermatitis is that they do not have enough defensins in areas of their skin. And as a result, they're getting an overgrowth of normal microbiota. Okay, so that's one of the things that's happening.
Wow.
And it's vitamin D related. Interesting.
Wow, that is fascinating.
And we know that historically, it's been 90% of the population that is vitamin D deficient, but the most recent stats say it's closer to 65% that are vitamin D deficient, but they changed the numbers of what deficiency looked like. So I think that's one of the reasons we saw that happen. But anyway, so vitamin D deficiency could be one of the contributing factors to atopic eczema. Now, the next thing is, we know that when you get the rash and the hives, that it's being caused by certain cell types. Okay, so the cell types that have the baseball gloves for the cytokines. Okay, so what cell types are causing those? Well, we know mast cells and eosinophils are the big culprits. And these are just cells, like you drew cells in high school. They just look like those things you drew in high school. It just happens to be that these are particular cells have, we call them granules, but you might call them grenades inside them. And when they blow up, then you see an outbreak on your skin in that location. What's interesting is we don't know how those cells wound up in those locations for different people. So I used to have a bit of an allergy to chocolate. And what was interesting is, I know how depressing.
I know, right? That's really sad. I would be really sad.
Yeah. Well, I don't still have it, although I still have a little scar from it, but I had 2 cells that responded. And I know that because every time I would eat chocolate, I would get 2 hives on my hand, right on the back of my hand. And my students could tell that I had had chocolate because these 2 hives would appear. And they'd be like, Dr. Zwickey, you ate chocolate, right? Why right there? Why? Who knows? It could have just as easily been on my shoulder. It could have just as easily been around my eyes. That's the part we don't understand. We don't understand why cells in a particular area for a particular person show up where they do. We know the process of what causes the rash. We know the process of the gut involvement. What we don't know is why that spot.
Can I ask you another question about I'm asking because I actually don't know the answer, but it was a thought that came to my mind as I'm listening to you. So there's the protein falagrin that is made that helps us with our skin barrier. And Dr. Peter Leo has told me repeatedly, and he said it on the Healthy Skin Show, that inflammation hijacks the gene falagrin from producing healthy falagrin. So I would thus assume that there is a connection here then between this cytokine issue.
There is.
And so is there a simple way to
Yes.
explain how cytokines could hijack your body's ability to make almost this like protective protein that your skin needs?
Mm-hmm. So when you get an infection, your immune system is designed to go through a process to eliminate the infection. And the first part of that process is called inflammation. And with inflammation, you have three very specific cytokines. They are called interleukin 1, IL-1, interleukin 6, IL-6, and TNF alpha. So this combination of cytokines, they actually are responsible for you feeling sick when you get sick. You know how like you're like, oh, I feel terrible. Yeah, it's those three proteins that go to your brain and tell you you're sick and make you go back to bed. But those three proteins are also circulating systemically in your body, and they're driving an inflammatory response. So let's think about what historically a inflammatory response was. This was if you went to battle, this is the response that is going to start your wound healing, right? If you are running from a tiger or a lion, this is the response that's going to help you should you get caught. It's going to help your skin heal, right? So these inflammatory proteins go right to your skin, likely because of how we evolved. Now, when they go to the skin, their biggest concern is not, does your skin look healthy? You're running from a lion. You don't care whether your skin looks healthy, right? What they're doing is they're turning on proteins and turning off proteins that are not necessary for you to be running from a lion, and turning on proteins that should you be caught, you're going to be able to defend your barrier function, right? And frankly, a rash doesn't matter from a barrier function perspective. So that's what those inflammatory proteins are doing, and that's why they're doing it. Now, here's the problem. Maybe you didn't have an infection, but you've got this inflammation process going on. Why? Well, we know right now in the United States, 3 of the top reasons we have chronic inflammation have to do with your diet. You might be eating a food that causes inflammation in you and you're not aware of it. Or you might be eating a food that causes disruption in your intestinal permeability and you're not aware of it. Or you might be eating a food that is just downright inflammatory, like trans fats, and you're not aware of how much trans fat you actually get in your diet. Those things alone will cause those 3 proteins to be produced. We also know that obesity causes those 3 proteins to be produced because the cells in the fat actually make those proteins. So you could have chronic inflammation because you're overweight, because you're eating something you shouldn't be eating, that you're not aware that you shouldn't even be eating that. It's specific to your body. And then the next major cause of chronic inflammation is stress. Stress. Who doesn't have stress right now? Right?
Know.
Yeah, we all do. So those proteins, part of our job is to get those proteins under control. And one of the pathways that does that is our resolution pathway. The resolution pathway is stimulated by fish oil and omega-3s. And how many Americans don't get enough omega-3s in their diet?
A lot.
Yeah, exactly. So here we're in this situation where we're in a scenario where we have high stress, and so we're making the inflammatory proteins. We're not giving ourselves enough of the nutrients we need to shut them down, and we're not being able to remove ourselves from the stressor, so we don't have that way to shut it down. So we're in this chronic inflammation, and when we have the chronic inflammation, it's turning on and off the proteins that are important for our skin integrity.
Man, all right. So first of all, my mind is blown. I have like a million questions for you. Yeah, we're out of time, surprisingly.
So we'll talk again sometime.
We're gonna have to talk again if you're open to that, because I feel like we're unpacking. Like I feel like we just had the basic conversation. I'm sure you could talk for hours on this. And I think what would be interesting too, you had mentioned at the beginning, and so we're not going to talk about this today, but maybe the next time. This is my hope. We could also talk about that connection you said between the immune system and the hormone system, which I think would be really fascinating because there is a hormonal component to this for some people.
No question.
And so I just want to recap my takeaways because I want to make sure we've thrown a lot of information at people. So we're looking at the importance of vitamin D. So you got to get checked. And I'm just going to add as a clinical nutritionist, if you don't have a gallbladder, there's a real good chance, especially if you're not getting out in the sun, you may be vitamin D deficient.
Oh, well, 90% of people are vitamin D deficient.
Right.
You want your vitamin D levels between 50 and 80. So go get checked and see where you're at.
Yeah. And then also,
remember,
go
there's
ahead.
genetic differences between people with their vitamin D receptors. And so for some people, you can be taking a vitamin D supplement and you think, I'm fine, I'm taking my supplement. But if your receptor is not a high affinity receptor, you might need to double or triple your dose to get enough vitamin D. So go get your levels checked so you know where you're at.
Yeah. And then the omega-3 piece to this, which you can get from food if you eat, cold water fish is a great source of omega-3s. If you're flax, yep, I like ground flax, just not if you're constipated, everybody. Not if you have diarrhea. If you have soft stools, ground flax is going to be a little tricky. Probably going to make it worse. But for constipated folks, it's great. And for those of you who poop just fine, awesome. For those of you who can't swallow pills, food options can be a great source, but some people may need to supplement at times because we have to keep in mind if you have spent years not paying attention to this and all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, oh, wait, I might be low or I am low, it might be tricky with just food alone to get those wells refilled. Sometimes you need a little help. But I want to thank you so much for being here. And I want to make sure everybody can connect with you and learn more about you and your work. So they can find you over at heatherzwickey.com. You're also on Instagram, HZWickey. We'll put these links in the show notes so it's easy for everybody to get in touch with you. But thank you so much for having this conversation. This has been super fun for me to nerd out on. So I appreciate you being here.
You're welcome.
The next time someone starts talking about immune system issues and your immune system going haywire and cytokines and all this stuff, you're going to know what they're talking about, which is so great. That's part of my goal, is to empower you guys to have more meaningful conversations with your doctors and to be able to understand all of these intricate, deeper kind of medical scientific conversations online so that you can also help piece things together. That said, I just am so appreciative that Heather was willing to join us, and I can promise you guys she's going to be back, so stay tuned. But if you want to check out any of the links and what we've talked about, it's all over in the show notes at skinterrupt.com/157. You can also leave your questions and comments there so that Heather and I can answer them. And if you know someone who is struggling with a lot of rash issues and you suspect a triggered immune system scenario, this would be a great episode to share with them. So make sure to share, right? Because sharing is caring. And before you head out for your day, I always ask you guys, and I really deeply appreciate seeing the reviews that you post online. If you haven't done so yet, head on over to your podcast platform of choice, rate and review the show, share your thoughts either on this episode or on the show in general. It means so much. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode.